we all have different types of perceptions of what we think is true and right. I just this morning I was online, and Santa had asked me to look for some of the things that are very interesting about us Hispanics, in Mexico, some things that are superstitions or whatever. And the first one it said was, if you look at a dog while it's going to the bathroom, you're going to end up with a pimple in your eye. Do you remember hearing that? ¿Te acuerdas? And I remember hearing that. And for the longest time, I remembered, there's a dog, he's making it, and then you look, because I don't want a pimple in my eye, Crazy, but that was what we grew up with,
They call perrilla because perrillas, because the dog, perro
Sí.
is perrilla.
Oh, perrilla. Oh, okay. And so we have, again, it's a worldview that we have, and every culture has certain worldviews, and we're going to react to different things different ways, right? As some cultures, we may find other countries they may have similar situations like us, and yet they're not stressed about it. Their bodies are not reacting because their worldview may be different, okay? And so the first thing we have to recognize is it starts with your perception. So it's not about events and experiences, except that's your perception. And they're finding that these chronic stress things are linked to heart vascular problems, hypertension, palpitations, arrhythmias, dizziness, lightheadedness, mitral valve prolapse. It's getting kind of gastrointestinal problems, gastroesophageal reflux disease, ulcers, gastritis, heartburn. I mean, it has a list, it's a long list, chronic fatigue. And then they're finding the link to cancer. Your body has these soldiers basically that go in and destroy all these cancerous cells. We're exposed to cancer all the time. Our bodies are always fighting rogue cells. Our bodies create rogue cells. They're bad. And so the body goes, oh, there's one, and takes it out. And so what happens is if you start eliminating those guys, then the possibility of getting cancer rises, right? And so the body, being under extreme stress, starts to eliminate or lower the number of those little soldiers that are going to help you keep your body clean and pure from cancer. And then the link to autoimmune disease, I shared that, arthritis and all kinds of stuff. Skin diseases. They found that psoriasis and others could be linked to stresses that a person has in their life. Allergies, food allergies, skin rashes, asthma, all those things. And so now what they're recognizing, okay, our bodies react a certain way, and if we are under that kind of stress for a long period of time, it's just not good. And so they're looking at, okay, so how do we change this? How do we get back to something that's a little more healthy? There's a phrase you may have heard: to err is human, to forgive is divine. So this was said by a guy named Alexander Pope. And it was such a great statement because it basically says, you know what? It's part of our humanity to make mistakes. It's part of our humanity to make bad decisions at times. Sometimes we don't do what's right. But to forgive is divine. That comes from a heart thing and a God thing. It's that part of you that you have in you, that all of us have within us. We have the capacity to forgive. One of the greatest things I love to see is when these little kids are all upset because that other mean little kid, so-and-so hit me, and they come and they'd be all upset, I'm like, it's gonna be okay, Rico, it's all right. And then 5 minutes later, Rico's out there playing like nothing ever happened, right? But when he came in, he was devastated, absolutely devastated. His little world was falling apart, this little guy, he was like, Dad, yeah, I know, it's gonna be okay, and then he'd go out there, and I'd look at him and it's like, why can't I be like that? Why can't I, when someone agitates me and makes me upset, why can't I be like in 5 minutes later, I'm over there playing again, as if nothing ever happened, right? And that's because this beautiful thing about a child that they have this capacity to forgive because their expectations aren't like ours. As we get older, we start to establish expectations. This is what we think how it should be. And the older we get, we become even more strict with our expectations. And so then we get a little bit, a little bit more agitated. A little, we get upset a little easier, And so why? Because we have expectations, we have expectations. And so those are the things that could cause some aggravation. And so, I see I already talked about that. Sorry. What forgiveness is not. We're going to start with that first. Forgiveness is not finding some redeeming quality that makes a person worth forgiving. In other words, if someone horrible did something horrible to you, you don't have to say, well, what's good about that person so that I can forgive them? You don't have to go looking for that. You don't have to go looking for that good thing in them so you can forgive them. Forgiveness is not just looking for something good so that you can use that to forgive them. Okay? We're going to look at what forgiveness is in a second. The second thing is forgiveness is not minimizing pain. Oh, it's okay. How many times have we done that? Hey, could you forgive me? That's no big deal. Oh, that's cool, right? But really it was. And we'll say it was no big deal. But it really was. And so we minimize that. And so what happens is we don't totally, absolutely forgive someone. Because we may say, it's cool, it's okay, but what we're basically saying is, I can deal with it. But we haven't freed ourselves. We haven't cleared the situation. And so that's what's important, that we go all the way and we don't minimize it, but that we deal with the reality of what that pain was. If someone has said something that was hurtful, then we need to walk through that. That's cool. I have a tendency to do that. I do that a lot. And so, and then what do? I get my little unforgiveness and I stick it in my little box, right? And I stuff it in here in my little box. And then I get my little box and I put it in the closet and I put it away because I'm a nice guy. And I'm a pastor and I'm not supposed to lose my mind. And so those are my perceptions. Those are my worldviews, right? I'm supposed to behave a certain way because I'm supposedly this guy, right? And so what do? I stuff it. I put it in that little box. I put it in the closet. And then some poor soul happens to come when my box is full. And I can't hold anymore. And then all of a sudden, they happen to go bring one more thing. And then what happens is I pull out that box and I go, and I shake the whole box over them. And I dump all this horrible stuff. And then that person says, well, what was that all about? Right? I know I blew it, but come on, man. So what was I doing? I was stuffing it all along. I was minimizing my pain. I wasn't dealing with I wasn't dealing with the reality of my pain, right? And so the key is I've got to find, number one, I don't need to look for some redeeming quality in that person so that I can forgive them. Oh, well, at least they're a good provider, so I guess I'll forgive them. Or at least they're, really nice with, a good worker. Okay, I'll forgive them. But it's like, you don't have to kind of play this game. You just have to work this out. And we're going to talk about that shortly. The third thing is forgiveness is not letting a person off the hook. In other words, if they did something that's horrendous, doesn't mean we just go, oh, well, I'm just going to let it go. If it's something especially like wrong that they would need to have to face the consequences, then they have to face the consequences because that's something that they must do. So we don't minimize it to the point we go, well, it's no big deal when it really was. And we don't let a person off the hook so that no justice is required. And so we've got to understand that. We've got to get that. So the first thing we're going to look at forgiveness. What is forgiveness? Forgiveness, first of all, is a choice. It's a choice. Every single one of us has the capacity and the ability to be able to make a choice. We're all free will people. And we have a choice to forgive. We can absolutely forgive someone, okay? Once we understand what forgiveness is, you'll start to see that forgiveness is not like forgive and forget. Because that's one of the things that we struggle with is, you mean if I forgive that person, I have to act like nothing ever happened? No, not at all. There are many people I have forgiven, but I don't have a relationship with them. I have not been reconciled, but I have forgiven them. I don't feel pain. You know, I don't feel pain. I don't feel anger towards them. I don't feel anything towards them. I mean, I have some empathy for them because I feel, I feel that, wow, our relationship was affected by this. So I feel that. But I don't have to say, hey, let's pretend like everything's back to normal. I've had relationships that were very painful, that I had invested a lot of time in, and I felt absolutely betrayed. And I still have a relationship with these people, but I go to a certain place. In other words, in order for us to be reconciled, we have to work at it. That person has to work at it, and so do I, right? And so, but I can forgive where I don't feel animosity. I don't feel this anger. I don't feel stress that every time I see them. When I was at Bonita Valley at the church in San Diego, we had this, we call it the parking lot test. And what we mean by the parking lot test was when we pull onto the parking lot, I would look and see all the cars parked, and then I would see certain cars. And I go, oh, man. Why? Because that person was there. And I knew, I just knew that this person was going to want to talk to me. And, this person, and I have a few people like that, because I would counsel them. And then, and they wanted me to counsel a certain way, and I was just calling it like it was, and they weren't happy with me. And I was just like, I'm just being honest with you. I'm just telling you exactly the way I see it. Biblically, I'm trying to give you something. And so they were pretty upset with me. And so, so they were still like, trying to work me, right? And I see them like, So I go, and as I realize, you know what? I can't have that. I need to forgive this person and not have a parking lot test where I just walk in and I go, oh, so-and-so's here. Maybe we can reconcile. Oh, so-and-so's here. Maybe we can walk it through and talk it through. And so I had to go through that process of understanding what forgiveness was. I shared this in the past a long time ago when I was going to Bible school. A friend of mine, good friend of mine, he was in the school, and he and the professor got into this big argument. And the professor yelled at my good friend, and he said, well, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm a pastor. I've been doing this for something years, 20 years or whatever, and you just started. You don't know what you're talking about. I do, so just be quiet. And so totally offended my friend. So I was upset at this guy. And this professor was the worship leader at the church that I attended. So he would play like maybe twice a month. And every time he went up there and he'd be there with his guitar playing, I'd be like this. I'm not going to worship God with that guy up there. How could he lead worship? The guy's so evil. The guy's this, the guy's that. Look what he did to my friend, right? And for 2 years, I was on staff. For 2 years, he and I sat across from each other. And I'd sit down, I'd put my briefcase in front of him like this, and I look at him like, just give me a look. I'm going to pound you. I was mad at this guy, right? And I finally realized I gotta repent. I gotta stop this. And so I went to my friend, another pastor, and I told him, hey man, here's what happened a couple years ago, and every time I look at so-and-so, I just want to jump over the table and just pound him, And has he done anything to you? I go, no. He hasn't even looked my way. Good thing. And then he says, well, you need to talk to him. Yeah, you're right. So I did. I went to talk to him, and I'm talking to him, and I'm telling him the story of, hey man, a couple years ago, I don't know if you remembered. And he goes, oh yeah, I remember. And then he's got this little smile. And I'm starting to get angry now because he's got a smile, right? And I'm like, ooh, But I told my friend I was going to talk about it, so I did. I talked it through. And then he says, okay, yeah, thanks for sharing. He says, I remembered what happened that day, and he says, and it was horrible. He says, I totally blew it. He says, and I went to your friend, and I apologized to him that day. And he said, and I even called his wife in, and I apologized to her, even though she wasn't even there. We're cool. We've been cool since that day. I said, what? What do you mean you've been cool since that day? I've been wanting to pound you for the last 2 years, man.